West Virginia mountain melody. There's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free. Your West Virginia mountain melodies.
Welcome to a very special edition of Around and About the Clarksburg History Museum. And today we are so pleased to welcome a fellow West Virginian who over his 50-plus years career has worked in television, film, stage, and author of several books. And I speak of none other than David Selby. David, thank you so much for joining us today to discuss your career.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
And I appreciate your love for West Virginia and history, too. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I want to start off, David. Tell me, where you were born and a little bit about your parents.
Well, I was born in Morgantown. My mom and dad had a little... I guess it was an apartment, and I was born in Morgantown, and my grandparents and my dad lived on the farm.
Oh.
And my grandparents were there, and then my dad built a house, and he was a carpenter. Eventually, he built a house in Morgantown, in a section called Woodburn. And as far as I know, that house is still there.
Oh, my.
It was on Ridgeway Avenue in Morgantown, West Virginia. And the last time I was there, of course, I drove by it just to, check on it or whatever.
Do you make it back?
For a little time.
Do you make it back to Morgantown very often? Do you make it back to Morgantown very often?
I haven't been back for a little while. But I used to go back all the time because once we get to Morgantown, and then we drive on down to Beckley to see my wife's, to visit my wife's old home and to see a couple of friends of hers. But yes, I still, I have friends or had friends in Morgantown and still do.
Did you spend any time on your grandparents' farm?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. As a kid, as a young boy, I was spent a lot of time on the farm.
It's a good life.
Yeah.
How about your mother? How about your mother? What was her maiden name?
My mother's maiden name was McIntyre. And she was born in Everettsville, West Virginia, which is a coal mining town. And her daddy, Pete, both he and my grandmother, Elizabeth, on my mother's parents, they were born up in Canada, but they were moved down by the coal company into West Virginia, into this part of West Virginia, Everettsville. And then my dad went to work for a company called DuPont back then, a chemical company, I think. And that was a long time ago. And my dad, he was in World War II. He joined the Navy. And so my mother, I was just hadn't been born long, but my mother put me on a train with her, and we took a train to New York City to see my dad in the Brooklyn Naval Yard. And then we, quickly or soon headed back to West Virginia. And I stayed in Morgantown until got married. I got married. I went to West Virginia University, where I did theater. That's where I found theater.
Were you the first? Were you the first one in your? Were you the first one in your family to go to college?
Yes. Yes.
Did you
West Virginia University.
did you play sports at WVU?
No.
No.
No. But I watched a lot of sports, back in those days.
You were probably
Football.
there. Were you there around the time of Jerry West?
Oh, yes. Yes. I went to see him. He was a little older. Went to see him play a couple of basketball games. And then there was another fellow after him. His name was Rod Thorne. He was a basketball player. But yes, I cheered Jerry West on, even when he became a Laker.
Well, tell me, growing up in Morgantown, did you always have a love for theater and film?
Well, I found theater, as I said, when I went to college at West Virginia University. I met a professor there, and I was in line. He was my advisor, but I was just in a line to take classes. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And this is a true story. His name is Charles Neal, Chuck Neal. And he had, I think, graduated from Cornell University, but was teaching at West Virginia University in the theater department. A place called Reynolds Hall. And he told me he thought that I could be an actor. I should be an actor. You look like you could be an actor. So I took his word for it. And that's Honey in the Rock at that time. They were auditioning some people up in Morgantown at the university. And so then that worked out. And then I spent, a couple of summers in Beckley doing Honey in the Rock.
So that was your first acting experience?
Honey in the Rock, well, yeah, aside from doing little scenes at the university, when I was in theater there, I did some scenes, but that was my first play where I got paid.
Oh, well, that's important. How much, can I ask how much you got paid?
Dear, I have no idea, but it couldn't have been, I don't know.
Just for the experience.
I'm taking a guess, I don't know, somewhere around $40.
Oh, my. Wow.
A week.
Wow. But that gave you the confidence to do more, didn't it?
Yes, that and the people that I worked with. The director was from, oh, God, I'm sorry. But he lived down he taught at a college in Virginia. And a wonderful fella. And then, Honey in the Rock paid,
Yeah.
They paid a little salary.
That's a part of our West Virginia history too, Honey in the Rock.
Honey in the Rock, you got it. It is indeed. And I can't tell you how wonderful it was to be there. At Granville, it was Granville State Park, is that it?
I don't remember,
anyway,
David.
Yeah.
When you were up in Morgantown, did you go to like Metropolitan Theater and the theaters up there?
Yeah. Metropolitan, there were 3 theaters. Warner's, down at the end of High Street, Morgan in the middle of High Street, and the Metropolitan Theater.
Okay.
And the Metropolitan Theater, I suppose, that and Warner's, they were the bigger theaters. A lot of times I went to the Saturday matinees at the Morgan Theater. They had 10 cents or whatever you could go there on the Saturdays.
Did you ever come down?
Yes, I went.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, did you ever come down to Clarksburg?
Oh, yes.
What do you remember?
My dad was a baseball coach.
Oh.
And I would go down a few times and play baseball down there.
Oh.
He coached baseball in Morgantown. He coached at, he was the American Legion, had a baseball team, so he coached there, and he coached me in Little League, you know, what they called Pony League then.
Uh-huh.
So, yes.
I have to ask you this, too. Did you ever cross paths with Don Knotts, another fellow Morgantown native?
Yes, he was, and he lived not too far from me when I grew up.
Really?
I met him. Not there, but years later. But I did have the opportunity to meet him.
That's great. I wondered about that because I kind of figured you had to cross paths at some point.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, of course, I was, I knew who he was.
Yeah.
He didn't know me, but that was all right. It was a wonderful, wonderful, you know, thing. And I was glad to have had that opportunity. You know, very chancy and very quick, you know, meeting.
So after you left Honey in the Rock, what was the next step for you, David?
After I left Honey in the Rock, my wife and I went to graduate school up at West Virginia University. She became, she was a teacher, English teacher. And she taught there, and then we took off, as I said. We had no idea where we were going, but I was offered an assistantship or whatever at Southern Illinois University, and she was offered an assistantship in the English department there. And we stayed there. We went out there and went to school for like a year and a half, 2 years, or maybe we were there. I can't. And then we headed back to New York. From there, I went to, you may have heard of it, because it's not too far from West Virginia, in southern West Virginia. It's called the Barter Theater in Abington, Virginia.
Okay.
And it was famous theater for, you know, a lot of people went there and, you know, got to do some plays there. So I was offered a chance to go to the Barter Theater from Southern Illinois University. I went up to Chicago to audition, and that's I got a job at the Barter Theater. So I took a train from Chicago, as I recall, stopped in New York briefly, stayed in a cheap hotel, and then made my way down to Abington, Virginia, and the Barter Theater. And I spent a couple of years there. My wife joined me. She played the piano, so she played the piano for the musical that was going on there at Barter for young people at that time. And then from the Barter, we went on. We met a director at the Barter. This is how things go. We met a director at the Barter. His name was Bill Woodman. And Bill said, "Why don't you come on up with me to the Cleveland Playhouse?" So we went from the Barter Theater right to the Cleveland Playhouse. And that was a wonderful thing for Bill to do. Yeah. And from there, we went to New York, my wife and I, as I mentioned to you. And, then one thing came after another.
And then that led you into Dark Shadows.
Led me into Dark Shadows. I was still doing off Broadway, then doing plays. And then I met a guy who wanted me to go to California. And I did, and I went out there to meet. That's it. I went out there to meet Barbara Streisand.
Oh, my.
And Barbara and I got along. So I did a film with her. And then eventually, soon after that, my wife and I decided we would move. And eventually we moved to LA, Los Angeles. Where eventually I started doing more other television shows and things like that. Meeting some wonderful. I
was going to say, tell me what was the film you made with Barbara Streisand?
It's called Up the Sandbox.
Oh, I've heard of that. Okay.
Up the Sandbox.
Now, so when did Dark Shadows come along then? Was that before that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no. It was right after that.
Right after that, okay.
Dark Shadows came, no. Up the Sandbox came after.
Oh, okay.
Dark Shadows.
I want to
just right on top of Dark Shadows. I was doing Dark Shadows, I think, when I got the offer.
So
to go, yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about Dark Shadows. And if folks listening are not real familiar with it, it was a Gothic soap opera on ABC from 1966 until 71, I believe. And your role was Quentin. Can you tell me a little bit about Quentin? What was his role?
Quentin was, he was the ghost of Quentin Collins. Quentin was quite terrific. He wore a long blue frock coat. He and the character played by a friend of mine, Jonathan Fred. Jonathan was from Canada, but he played Barnabas.
He was a vampire.
He was a vampire,
and he was
werewolf.
He was the vampire, wasn't he, David?
Yeah, the vampire. And I was a werewolf at the time. And actually, I just did a thing. I read a series of letters that Jonathan wrote to his family back in those days. And another friend of mine, she's quite wonderful, she wrote a script based on the letters that Jonathan wrote to his father, father. And so I read those at a program, was quite special. I, enjoyed it very much. It was very meaningful to me.
Is that for his 100th anniversary? I believe I saw that. Yes, I saw that was coming up. He was quite the actor. I mean, he was Shakespearean trained.
He was Shakespearean. He went to Yale Drama School.
Now,
he was very well trained and a very good actor.
So did the series start without him first, and then when he came on, that's when the series just kind of exploded, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, he was on pretty much from the beginning. He was on before I was, but we were all there pretty much together. In fact, I'm working right now with at least a couple of people that were on Dark Shadows with me. Catherine Scott and another actor named Jim Storm. They were on Falcon Crest. I mean, they were on Dark Shadows.
Now, as a young actor, I bet you learned a lot from these people because you had people like Joan Bennett in that famous, Hollywood actress.
Joan Bennett, I can't tell you how wonderful she was.
What was she like to work with?
She was a dear person. She talked to you about, you watched her. She was just wonderful. We became very good friends.
She started off.
My wife and I.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say she started off in silent film.
Yes, but Joan Bennett was wonderful. She had a sister, Constance Bennett. Her father, I think, was Richard. And Joan, she was so special to me. I looked up to her and listened to what she would tell me. And so I had what I think was a very wonderful relationship that developed into a treasured friendship. And there were so many that later on I got to be friends with Jane Wyman.
You were so fortunate to work with these people, David.
Yes, I was. Very much so.
I want to make an observation because I love the silent film actors and actresses. And I noticed, in silent film and early film, there are certain actors that can use their eyes to express things without words. And I think you had that gift. Your eyes were so expressive. And I think if you could have been a time traveler, you could have went back and easily fit into the silent film days. Or Jimmy Cagney is another one I thought that used expression with his eyes.
James Cagney?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a gift.
Well.
But also you worked with Laura Parker. You want to say a few things?
Yes. Laura was wonderful. A few months ago, they did a special thing for Laura. And she was wonderful.
She just passed away this past year, didn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And a beautiful actress, too. So beautiful.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Another one I'd like to...
She grew up down around Tennessee.
Oh. I want to also touch on the career of John Carlin.
John Carlin was a very, very dear friend of mine. Johnny and I, we became friends and remained friends the rest of his life, and still, he's a wonderful man.
Wasn't he terrific in Cagney and Lacey?
Oh my God. He was a good actor and a wonderful person. We had a lot of fun together.
I think it would have been enjoyable going into work every day at Dark Shadows, it sounds like.
Yeah, every day I'd walk down what was 8th Avenue, cross over to 9th Avenue, down around Lincoln Center, and I'm talking about New York City. Walk down to 53rd Street, take a right, walk down toward 10th Avenue, and on the right-hand side was the Dark Shadow studio.
Were you prepared for the fans that just loved you, David, as Quentin? Were you prepared for that?
There was no way you could prepare for that. I didn't know, and none of us knew that. But, of course, it was wonderful. I mean, the fans became, goodness, I'd go out from the studio, and they would some of them would walk home with me up to our apartment. They were wonderful, great fans, and in fact, for years and years, and still, I'll get a letter. The letters came when they eventually reached the thousands. And it was a treasure.
And they still have the conventions, and the fans are still there, and new fans are being made.
Yes. The Dark Shadows it's still running. I mean, you can still get it. What do you call it? They stream it.
Stream it,
It's called streaming, yeah. But it's it's like Falcon Crest. I did a show called Falcon Crest.
Oh yes.
And you can stream Falcon Crest today.
And I don't know that people realize with Dark Shadows, I mean, the merchandising that went along with that. You had records and books, and you were in all the teen magazines.
Yeah.
And loved your sideburns, David. Loved those sideburns. I think Elvis copied off of you.
I had a great... I don't know. We just came out. Vanilla Scott, he was my makeup man. And he had the idea. And so we did it. And once he did it, I said, I liked them. So we kept them. It was fun.
And everything on that show, I mean, excellent music, excellent costumes. The sets were great.
The music was quite special.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. All original orchestrations. In fact, if I got up from my computer right now, I could walk into my little office off our bedroom, and there is original music there from Dark Shadows.
Oh.
The original, the Bob Cobert. His name was Bob Cobert. He is responsible for all of the music. And he was an extraordinarily gifted gentleman.
The music was beautiful. Just beautiful.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite a show. Did you all film that live, or was that all videotaped?
We used videotape, but we never stopped. In other words, it was like doing it live.
Uh-huh.
The only time we would stop, I don't know, is if the camera broke down. We had to redo a couple of times. We used 3 or 4 cameras at the studio on 53rd Street, and it was quite wonderful.
Do all of the episodes survive, or were any lost?
As far as I know, most, if not all, the episodes are still there.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I want to tell you, after you left Dark Shadows, what did you do?
Well, after I left Dark Shadows, I said I went out to California. So, I did plays in New York. And then soon I went to California, as I said, to be in the film with Barbara. And then I did a couple of the films in New York, Super Cops, and just various films. And then I I ended up doing a couple of other series. Then the one that ran the longest was Falcon Crest.
Can I tell you that where I first remember seeing you, that you made such an impression with me?
Yeah.
You did the Waltons episode. I thought
that's where I got to kiss. I got to kiss Olivia.
Yes, I loved that episode.
Michael Lerner. Michael lives out here in L.A. Off in the little suburb. And she and I did a play together. Oh, it's been several years ago now. Out here, we did a play together. And she is very special.
Yes.
To me.
Yes. And that show was absolutely wonderful.
The Waltons.
The Waltons.
That episode.
Written by Earl Hamner.
Earl Hamner?
Yeah.
From Virginia.
Yes. And to me, growing up here in West Virginia, that gave me such a sense of that's how I lived. Loved the mountains, loved my family. But I did not know Earl Hamner wrote Falcon Crest.
Yes.
Did you have an opportunity to meet him, David?
Oh my goodness. Did I have an opportunity to meet him?
You knew him?
Yes. Yes, he and his family. No, so I walked in, he had an office out of Warner Brothers. And this was an early trip. Somehow I went to L.A., ended up in L.A. This was many years ago in the 70s, early 70s. And I went over to Warner Brothers because Earl was going to do a show that he did, but he had an office at Warner Brothers. And so I got to meet him. And that's, we did, I can't remember what show. Let's see. What show did you just mention?
On the Waltons, and then he did Falcon Crest.
Falcon Crest, but he did a show before Falcon. Anyway, he's the reason that I ended up doing Falcon Crest.
Oh, really?
It was all because of Earl.
Oh. Okay, well, let's talk about Falcon Crest.
Well, Falcon Crest, I was living in L.A. We were living in L.A. We decided to move back. Earl said to me, as I was leaving one day in Warner Brothers, and he told me, he says, "Hey, I'm gonna see you soon." So I got back to New York, and Earl had sent for me, said, "We have a job for you." So my first trip back then, after that, he had told me, was to go to Napa Valley. I went right from New York to Napa, and the first person I meet is waiting to talk to me is Jane Wyman.
Oh, my.
And we talked, and then Earl, of course, was the reason for that. But anyway, that's, it's been, what can I say? I've been very gifted. Very blessed.
You have been blessed, David. Was Jane Wyman good to work with?
Jane Wyman was every bit like Joan Bennett. They were two of the best human beings I've ever met.
That's wonderful. Wonderful.
They were wonderful.
You had
Jane actually told me once, she said, "People think Ron and I don't get along, but we do." Her husband was Ronald Reagan. at one time. Anyway,
You had some.
you started to say something.
I was going to say there were a lot of other wonderful stars of Hollywood on there too. Lana Turner, Kim Novak.
Lana Turner. Lana again was wonderful. Who else did you mention?
Kim Novak.
Kim.
Celeste Holm.
Celeste Holm. So many.
Oh, yeah. It was.
Oh, Gina Lola Brigida.
Yes. Cesar Romero. Yeah.
Cesar Romero. Cesar was a dear friend. They were all good friends, you know. We had a good time together.
I bet that was an interesting role playing Richard Channing, though. What a juicy role to have.
Yes, it was. It was a good role, and every once in a while, somebody reminds me of it. So, yeah. Very, very blessed.
Where did you go from Falcon Crest? Just different, various television shows and film?
Where did we go?
Yeah, after
Falcon Crest.
After Falcon Crest?
After Falcon Crest, I was back in New York for a while, but I stayed a lot of time then back in Los Angeles, and where we had, our family. And that's where we decided, okay, this is where we're going to live. Mm-hmm. And we remained in California. And with a yearly trip, a summer trip back to West Virginia.
Good for you.
All the time. Oh, yeah.
Like for people that have never been to West Virginia, David, could you touch upon what it means to you to have been born and raised here? You never lose that love, I don't think, for your state.
No. West Virginia, again, meant so much to both my wife and myself. We had so many dear friends there. And it was, it's where you grew up.
And you kind of get used to people saying to you, well, I've been to Richmond.
Yeah, I've been to Richmond or,
Winchester.
Yeah.
They're still saying that.
Yeah.
I tell you, David, you really made an impression on me also. I saw you here several years back when you portrayed Abraham Lincoln in the one-man show.
Oh, my goodness.
David, you were Lincoln.
Well, thank you. That Lincoln was very special to me. I remember it all started in Southern Illinois, and where I did summer stock. I did stock up in Lincoln's hometown, up around Petersburg, where I visited his home in Springfield. But it was there and then a professor, Christian Moe, at Southern Illinois University, got me started and said, you got to do some Lincoln. And so we did. And I grew up, and then all of a sudden, one day I get a call. And I flew back to New York and met this producer of Ford's Theater. And in fact, one of the producers there, his name is Mark Vermont, called us about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we got together out here in Los Angeles. And so those people, were, for being at Ford's Theater.
What was that like, David, to be at Ford's Theater portraying Lincoln?
Oh, well, you can imagine.
Oh, my.
It was very special. I was blessed. I still keep in touch. In fact, they've got a Lincoln show there going now with an actor. His name is Scott Bakula. And Scott and I had worked together. He's doing some kind of Lincoln thing.
I remember him from Quantum Leap. He's a great actor. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but anyway, I did a long run at Ford's Theater with Lincoln.
Were you always interested?
I was there when, let's see. I was there when President Obama came backstage with his wife. And then we went to the White House, my wife and I, to visit there. And we have a picture of the Obamas, of us in our little library we have here.
Oh, that's great. Were you always interested in history?
Yes, I guess so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, of course, the Ford's Theater, I couldn't get enough of it, I loved it.
What I loved about your performance too, David, you also, I thought, captured the dialect and the speech of Lincoln, how he would have sounded.
Thank you very much.
Excellent job. Excellent.
Yeah.
And I also want to
go into a little Lincoln voice now, but I'm not going to do it. Sure.
And I also want to touch upon your poetry.
My poetry is, I have some poetry books. In fact, a person is dropping by our house here tomorrow to pick up a lot of books. I gave a lot away there because she's going to New York and she's going to, need the book. So I'm giving her a ton of books to take back with her. Anyway, but, dear, I hate to break this up.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to have to, I have to get going.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. Let me just finish my little thing. David, I really appreciate you talking with us today. That's just been great.
Well, thank you.
And I want to invite you, if you're ever back to the Clarksburg way, to stop in and see our museum. We'd love to have you.
At the Clarksburg, and the museum is called?
The Clarksburg History Museum.
Clarksburg History.
We're on Main Street in Clarksburg. Love to have you.
Well, we will try very much to do that.
And thank you. It's been the highlight of my day to have you as my person to talk to today.
Maybe we can stop in Clarksburg on a drive from Morgantown to Beckham.
I would love that. You let us know when you're coming.
All right. Hey, take care of yourself.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to close this episode by saying, make each and every day count because you are making history today. Thank you, David Selby.
Oh, thank you, dear.
There's sweet music in the silence of your wildwood, to the rhythm played by every mountain stream. It becomes a lullaby every time that I come home to West Virginia in my dreams. West Virginia mountain melodies, there's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free, your West Virginia mountain melodies. I feel secure in the arms of your green valley. There's a peace you've given me that's yours alone. Take me in like a child to the gentle of your wild West Virginia. I'm coming home. Your West Virginia mountain melodies, there's a new river singing to me. All this time it's wild and free, your West Virginia mountain melody. West Virginia mountain melody, there's a new river singing to me. All this time it's wild and free, your West Virginia mountain melody.